It's working on it. All right, Meredith Lucky Stars. So while you're
Hi.
listening, hey there. So while you're listening, everybody, go to meredithluckystars.net and check it out. And then I think you've got like $44 like 2024 readings. I think I saw you mention that on Instagram. So everybody, go and get Meredith's stuff.
Oh, yay. Yeah, got my stuff. No, yeah, they'll just be like a around 20-minute 2024 astrology reading. It'll be recorded and it'll be sent to your email. So yeah, I would love to do that for you. And how you
Yeah.
doing, Craig?
Oh, I'm doing good. I'm doing good. It's been a positive day, roller coaster day. We're seeing, as we're going to talk about many things, but definitely the energy out there, I'll call it the cosmic energy, is definitely, this is a turbulent and challenging existential time.
Whew. Yeah. It's like having to find like mastery, on that level where like you can kind of dip into and out of certain topics, right? Like in certain ideas. Like sometimes I just want to go to work and go to school and not have sort of like the boulder on my shoulder, so to speak, of like, the world and what's going on with it,
Yeah. Well, it's funny. Brian Scott just did a video that was premiering before this, and it was just called "Let the Leaves Fall." And he was talking about that same thing. You don't want to be the guy, I forget his name, who's pushing the boulder up the hill and then it falls down, then he pushes it up the hill. Because he was referring to that as the past. And it's
Yeah.
like right now we have this both a nostalgia for the past, I think, but also the past seems very very dead in a way. It's
Yeah.
I like ever since like let's say January 2020, there's been a big difference, and the the past is both nostalgic but also um, it's like an old person going to J.C. Penney's who like
Yeah.
remembers J.C. Penney's in like 1950.
Mm.
And they're walking back into it now, 1923. No, 1923 would have been better. 2023, they're walking back into it, and it's dirty. The employees are indifferent, don't care. Everything in there is cheap, and you just see this like there's a lot of zombies out there walking around who are nostalgic for the past, but yet the past doesn't exist in the present anymore. If that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think in astrology there were some massive conjunctions of certain planets in January of 2020. There was like Saturn and Pluto came together in Capricorn, which preceded many plagues, throughout history. And I think that plagues and like tyranny kind of like seem to travel side by side through like the Saturn Pluto conjunctions that have happened in history. So yeah, I think like there was a thing that happened and it's like society is changed and is different. And I think what I've noticed though, we're kind of like inching toward a conversation about Neville is like, as I change, like, because really like his philosophy is that there's no one to change but self, right?
Yes.
So as I change and like as I really, I guess I feel like I went from like the quote old man to the new man. Like I feel like I did that like in the last couple of months. Like I feel like I went through it in like a tunnel. And I guess since I've been changing, like the reflections that I've been seeing have been like directly proportionate to that. And like what I'm kind of like literally like brainwashing myself to expect. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And I kind of wonder, like, is this like level of having to like exert metaphysical authority? I wonder, like, is it a trauma response? Do you know what I'm saying? Like, am I
Yeah.
doing this because I feel like I have to, or I might not survive. Like, I know that sounds like we're really starting it off with like the existential stuff, but I think when I started this process, it was kind of coming from the place of like, oh, my mind is like running on autopilot, right? And I'm like, kind of perpetuating these ideas, whether they're like about collective existential dread or about personal existential whatever. I'm going through that and I'm just like, wow, I just have this autopilot and I'm not even like watching it or like concerning myself with it. And so what if I really like took that time and like cultivated the mental discipline to think and imagine in my favor? Like, would that change anything? I really feel like it was kind of started because I was in like a really weird place, and then I was like, but I can confirm that the last few months have been some of the best times of my life. And, I feel like all of the Neville Goddard mind magic is definitely the cause, and what it's done to me, because it has a transformative effect, like when you like interface with the material. So.
Oh, it definitely does. And now I think it is sort of a trauma response is a good way to put it, because you can only say things so well. I mean, but no, I think that we're in a situation where many people have spoken about it, where you see that like bifurcation of humanity, like the major timeline splits, and we've talked to people on the show about that, and I'm sure you've heard people talk about it and such, where humanity's, some call it like the 5D, and that works, however a person wants to see it, but we're seeing this evolutionary split. And I think that's because there's nothing physical, there's nothing in the world of Caesar, as Neville would put it, that can save us. Put it that way. So like humanity is either the only future that the awakening individual is going to have, who's in touch with the Neville material, because that's a natural thing you're going to find. From that plateau, it's almost like there's one timeline. Then the other timeline, which may take a lot of the masses with it, we shall see, is something's going to happen. That's I look at it like I really don't have words for it, because the thing is that with Neville, as he spoke of, you can skip between timelines. Let's call it. Like you can there's only this present moment. There's God consciousness, and then of course some things are. I like to think of it as some things already exist, like a great big film reel, but it's infinite in every direction, and you can be at any one spot at any moment you want to, or even several, and aware of it. And so, since time's not linear anyway, and you're just flittering through moments within timelines, I do think that humanity has maybe a collective future, which is not so great, one timeline, but then there's people who are figuring it out, and there's another timeline, and they're on that. Even though everyone's manifesting the whole of it for themselves, it's almost like there is kind of two teams, and they are going to sort of be together as we move forward. But it's strange because like one of the things we were talking about a little bit via just like email was one timeline doesn't really have much of a future, and one does. So you're sort of forced to start using the Neville material, manifesting and creating what you want, because I feel like you're going to have to learn to be at peace and thrive and manifest and be blissful in the midst of hell.
Oh my gosh, it's so funny that you say that, because I just made my like first 2024 video out of several, because I think 2024 is like a really pivotal year. And like it just has so much energy around it, right? And I think I said something to the effect of like heaven or hell is like a world line away from one another, right?
Yes.
And that it depends, I think, on like what we're consciously creating. And I think that a lot of like the principles of like turning, even though, gosh, you know, it's like I've had such a journey, even just in a short time with this material, that I felt, I don't know if you had this experience when you first discovered it, but like I felt kind of almost dissociated, and it wasn't good. It was like this, it turned my life upside down at first in a negative way. Like when I first discovered it, it was June of this year, and it like tore everything asunder because there were things that like I was trying to like ignore, or like, you know, trying to kind of like glaze over. And I realized that I was always on sort of like a path of like renunciation, like renouncing things like, you know, veganism, or like more Eastern, right? And I was always in that space. And then I really stumbled upon it. I really started to like, with conviction, reprogramming my subconscious after like everything exploded in my life, and I felt like delusional and detached and like disconnected from reality, sort of. Then I started to really get it, because I felt myself like shifting. You know what I mean? Like where you can feel, you're like, oh, the reason that I'm feeling kind of wobbly right now is because I'm in between dimensions or like states. So you talk about timelines, right? And like a state is a timeline, is a reality, is a dimension, right? And so if you're like, if you're in between and you're not feeling like quite anchored to either state, you know, what you're moving from and what you're going towards, you're not really going to feel very secure and very like, do you know what I'm saying? And so I really have felt like the phases of like the in between, you know, and then locking into like the state where I have my like wish fulfillment or whatever, right? And then being like, oh damn, like I'm in it, like we're in it, this is happening, you know?
Yeah.
It's just been a crazy journey for me. And so like I think that this, if there is a new earth, right? Or like if there is like a new, because I feel it, I mean, there's like a dimensional phasing or like a rapture or whatever that you're talking about. Like if there is that, then this material is like how it comes around. I'm like almost certain of that. Like, you know, being like ignoring the third dimension almost in a way that's not disembodied, but just being like, meh, you know, because circumstances change, you know, very quickly when you change, you know?
Well, they do. Well, because you're manifesting all of it. It's like there's two of my favorites are and I have that book too. That's like I definitely recommend that. That's the Neville Reader, and it's everything. Just start at the beginning. It's in a great order. And you know, I kind of, my favorite Neville stuff was probably like the 50s and like around 1970. Oh, he did some great stuff, but my favorite stuff really is the and we'll talk about it more, but like the Law, as he would put, then you have the Promise, where everyone eventually will get around to, you know, reading about and getting into Neville and the Promise. But that's no one should feel guilty about not giving a crap about it, because it's not practical anyway for a while. I think it's like you're gonna get the Law down, and then the Promise will just naturally come. And he was very the Promise, according to, you know, Neville, was very structured, sort of as you become, let's call it enlightened for a lack of a better word. You know, you start to have this really powerful God consciousness. And the thing is, like around 70, I think that around 1970, I think that Neville he was almost just getting tired of being in form, and he was having so many existential experiences that he talked about the Promise a lot, because he was just so over having a body. You know what I mean? That I think it kind of gets where it's almost like when I'm an old man, like I'll start getting more into the Promise, because then it'll be more relevant. Right now, I'm like, that's a long way from now. But the At Your Command is the first one.
That's a good one.
And that's the first, I think, in the Neville Reader. And if a person's wondering about, you know, the Neville material, well, we can define the Law and the Promise, but also there's The Power of Awareness.
That's a good one.
Yeah,
Feeling is the Secret. Awakened
Feeling
Imagination.
Oh
yeah,
yeah,
they're so good.
they're all great.
So what I love about him, okay, so he's not a channeled entity like Abraham Hicks or Bashar, right? He's not like this quote unquote like superior consciousness that has come down so benevolently to earth to educate all the plebes, you know what I mean? Like he's himself, and he's also Jesus Christ, like in the same
within
way.
you.
Yes, exactly. And so, yeah, I'm
and
excited.
Also, it removes fear too. I think a lot of us have, biblical fear. I grew up in a somewhat churchy household, and definitely around churchy people. And I like, bless all that. It's beautiful, all wonderful, good to go, But the thing is, when you get into the Neville material, one of the things that can mess with your equilibrium is, all that's crap.
Yeah.
That like, the church in the corner, it's like, bless y'all, but you are so off the mark. You know what I mean? And it's not that you're egotistical, but you're just like, I've got it. And the thing is, I'm not, I guess what you could way you look at it is, I know who I am, and that's it. And you no longer have that. I'll just call it biblical fear. It's just gone.
It's so funny that you say that, because like now, okay, and I'm not strictly only Neville. Like I've been reading like Joseph Murphy and Florence Scovel Shinn, and have been reading even from like H. Emily Cady, and like I've been going way back into like the 1800s of New thought. And I find myself saying, like in my head, it's so beautiful when I really sit here and think about it and contemplate it. I find myself in my head saying, like, thank you, Heavenly Father. And just like putting myself just in this like trance, or like, and just being so, it's weird. I've never been a God the Father person, but then kind of reading Neville, I've discovered that like the Father is really just consciousness, awareness, right? And so you can't really do anything without that. If you think about like the Father within like a home, is like the backbone ideally of a home, so we all have like God the Father like within us. And I think this really helped me to see that. And I've been feeling so like protected and secure and way more provided for. Like my own personal like abundance sense has kind of actually gone up in the last couple of months. It's interesting. Like, and my capacity has grown to be able to do more, and to like kind of, stretch into new areas where maybe prior to that I would have been like too sensitive, or like have needed like a lot more downtime. So I think in a lot of ways, like it's actually repaired my relationship to God the Father, what that actually is. Like I feel like I've found something within myself that's like a hidden reserve, or like a treasure, or like a resource, and it's very powerful. It's like finding like your inner, you were talking about finding your God state, or like feeling like just really feeling that. Like that's something we're not really taught to lean into, we're really like taught to externalize that. And
that's a tough one. And, for me, one of the things that happened was I was so frustrated at first. I was, because what happens is that like you have such a habit of God being external. And you're like even you can say, like with like Abraham Hicks, like the law of attraction, you think you're going to become in vibrational harmony with what you want. There's always something out there. And so when we have a world that's based on God is out there, when all of a sudden you go through, say, moments of awakening with the Neville material and other material, because everyone's going to be looking at many things, but because it's on your soul's schedule. You've started the path when it was time for you to start it, but you've been working on that for quite a while, being ready at that moment, And then you start going through these just huge leaps of consciousness in the Neville material, I believe. And so the thing is all of a sudden God's not out there, and you just drop it. And to me, it was frustrating. It was like, darn it, I'm so used to God being like this out there thing. And I'm so used to like the law of attraction. I'm going to really become, in vibrational harmony with that. And we're going to sync up. Then you realize, no, I'm the center. I am, and I am what I decree. I am my intent. I am my expectation. I'm creating it all. It's like, you're almost kind of sad because you're like, oh man, God's right here.
Yeah.
And you're just like,
oh,
damn.
That means I have to do it.
Yes. Yeah. But I have all the power. I am. And like when you really get that, people will get very mad if you say, well, if you put on your little business card, God, here you go.
Yeah.
What would you like? I can envision that. I can be that state for you, see you as that, and then that will be. If you don't believe it, I'll do it for you. They'll be like, who the fuck do you think you are?
I know. It's become kind of fun though to like have this type of it's a whole new tape in my mind. Like in my mind, I'm playing a whole new type of track than what I was playing before. It's very different. I'm like, I think that he says, maybe I forget which book it's in, but he says to like treat each thought as an investment.
Don't
and
spend, invest.
Yeah. So I've been really, it's crazy how, it's just changed me. Like I used to really like feel the need to like vent to like different people like over and over about like the same issue. And like now I'm like, oh my God, I would not dream of doing that. Not that it's like bad to get things off your chest or whatever. It's just like a very different way of living and way of operating. And it's not because I'm kind of treating my mind like a 3-year-old child in a way where I'm like, you don't want to burn. You've burnt your hand on enough stoves and you don't want to do it this time, like, so yeah, I think that I've experienced like the real fruits of like being like what Neville calls double-minded. You know what I mean? Like I've experienced that and the results of that in my own life. And so now I don't have time for that. I'm just like really like igniting the inner father and like creating my fucking life. Cause that's what I feel like I need to do. Or like, it's just maybe it's the trauma response, and that's fine. But like, is it the chicken or is it the egg? Like, were we always going to go through a period of evolution and, maybe we're being pushed to do this right now, not in a bad way, but like in a, like maybe like the greater picture, like there's a reason why we're having to kind of like fire up and come up with like solutions in consciousness, because maybe we wouldn't do it unless we're like, people don't do anything. They don't change unless they have a fucking book on their head, like,
yeah.
So,
yeah, no, it's true. And I think so there is ultimately it's a God consciousness. So there is the consciousness, and then we are it. And so, when cycles are changing, I would say like we're living in a time of an end of cycles, a beginning of cycles.
Totally.
And so it's almost like you're going to have, be in this world, but not of it. And so your attention and your manifestational ability has to be on that new world, the next cycle. And it's not even egotistical. It's just a matter of like you as God manifested this individuated consciousness at this time to step between cycles. And that's it. Yeah. And that's it. It's and is everyone going to do that? Absolutely not. I have no doubt. But that's fine, because I look at like, to me, there's something, I have this theory about the world, like the earth is just a certain frequency range, and the earth itself will never change. The same shit will be happening in 1,000,000 years. Okay. Yeah. But you, on the other hand, will go to next frequency earth. And it doesn't make this one wrong. There's no good or bad in it. Just this, like you could say 3D Earth is this frequency range, but then let's say 4D, 5D Earth is a higher frequency range, and they might all be happening on top of each other, but there is definitely a state split, a timeline split, where some are going this way and some are going that way, and there's lots of gray space, but in general, as somebody put it, there's like a love train and a fear train, and they've left the station and they're going in different directions, and there's no hanging out at the train station anymore. You're going to have to pick your division. Which way are you going? I think that's a little bit, it's kind of laying a lot of cosmic rules down, which I don't really like, but it does seem to be that way. It does seem to be that way, I think.
Yeah, it's pretty, I guess, since like really starting to do whatever it is that I'm doing, it feels like reality shifting. I was hit by a car like in the last like month or so, and I just got up and walked away from like, I was on my bike and I just rode my bike home and nothing happened. But it's like, I think I've just been experiencing some of that shifting, and some of it actually seems kind of like lateral. It doesn't even seem like necessarily I'm going from like, I mean, I think I'm in a, like, because I've been kind of traveling or whatever for the last couple of months, I feel like I'm in a much better state, but it's not like I'm really going anywhere. Does that make sense? It's like, it's all here, right? It's all, and like the being in consciousness or whatever that I am has access to all of it. So, I think I totally understand what you're saying, and feel that maybe there's like, since there's infinite versions of like you and everyone that and me, and maybe there's aspects of us that are on both,
I can
timelines.
See it.
And because I kind of like, I think when I've experienced that wobble where I'm really in between, I think that there have been times in my life where I've been very anxious and I've been almost like spiraling. And it's because actually I was like in between states and I didn't understand like what exactly was happening. Do you know what I mean? And so
exactly.
I think kind of space seems to be like a farce, like it's fake. So whatever is happening seems to be happening on like a dimensional level, but it's all here. Like there's no, it's been described to me more by like my spirit, but it's hard to describe. It's like there's nowhere to go, but it's like within you are all of these like world lines, right? And that's like the book Out of This World is really good and talks about that. And it's kind of like have you seen the
OA? What's that?
It's on Netflix. It's a show. It's actually fucking amazing. But in the last scene of the last season of the last episode, I'm gonna spoil a little bit of it. The guy that's like the supervillain says, within the human mind, like there's a multiverse. So all we have to do is like change our state on that like subconscious level, and then we're in a new timeline, or you know what I mean?
Well, Neville talked about how when he was in, let's say, quiet presence, when he was meditating, he would see different versions of himself. He would go and see Neville in a different life, and so you definitely are. And he even talked about one of the things that really is amazing that he talked about was where he could see an individual and he would see them in multiple states at once. So he would see somebody who it's that one story he talks about where someone died, but then he also saw them. So he was like aware of these multiple states at once from what appears to be one individual is actually an individual that is, we all think, oh, I'm in this state right now, but you're also in this one and that one and this one and that one, and it's all happening at once. And so, it's we're not living in and that's a tough one for the mind, because the mind will never get it, but you can get it. And that's the thing, knowing versus mind. And you realize, like, yes, there's, I'm doing this from multiple levels. I'm doing this from multiple complete conscious versions of myself. Wow. There you go.
I think that, like, the mind wants things to be very, like, linear, understandable. I think we've been kind of entrained, and, like, we interface with this realm in a way that's very, like, emotional, like hormonal, at least it seems very intense in that way. Like, the reptilian kind of part of us is, like, really dialed up, where, like, when we have a reptilian brain, and we have it, I think, for a reason, but I think, like, that, whatever that is, I think that for me, I couldn't do Neville. Like, I couldn't take the plunge on this and still be in that. Even though I know I'm a woman, I know I have cycles. I allow myself those cycles, but I couldn't be, like, in this material and still holding on so tightly to everything that's emotional and hormonal and, like, that way of interfacing with life. Like, I had to kind of take a step back and, like, be a little bit more detached. And I think that initially that caused me to go right out of my body. Like, I didn't know how to do that. And it made me feel very, like, dissociated, I guess, in a way. Like, for me, I mean, I make no mistake, it got worse for me before it got better. And then I really, like, pruned the vine, I guess. Like, I've done a lot of, like revision and a lot of, like, sort of, like, subconscious reprogramming to kind of expect the best out of, like, my universe, rather than perhaps, like, expecting the worst or partially expecting the worst and partially expecting the best, which gives you a very chaotic reality, So I've just been, but since I've become, like, a lot more congruent, more detached, more embodied, less emotional with this material, it's just changing the game, like, altogether for me, and really reminding me who I am, like, on that level. And I think that it's there to help you remember your power,
Yeah. And I think that with the Neville material, and as you can see, people who see the video, the Neville reader, which is it's a great place to start. If you just start from one end, go to the other, the Neville reader, the Neville collection, I guess they call it. Yeah. Because it starts with his first book and it goes in, I think, chronological order. And that's a great way to do it, and maybe when you get to the power of awareness, you start getting past that. There's out of this world. There's that one section in one of the books where he talks about the like being on a ship and having a vision. Oh, I forget that one. But anyway, like, go as far as you want, because eventually it gets kind of promisey towards the end. you might be, and if you like the promise, then there's a book called Resurrection that he wrote. Ooh. And that's just 100% promise. It is the whole God consciousness experience, and it's called Resurrection. And I was somehow I was, like, inspired, and I actually, like, read it, like, cover to cover. And it's all biblical reference. It's really heavy stuff. So Resurrection, if you're into the promise, it is there for you. Read Resurrection. It's there.
Okay. I haven't read it yet.
Yeah, and another one is the 5 lectures, which is 5 of his lectures, and it's on the promise. It's very good at the actual manifestation aspect. It's in all the books, but that's a great spot. But somewhere in the material, because this is the thing, and I imagine you've listened to Neville in his own voice. One nice thing with Neville is there's tons of recording of Neville. Yeah. And many people have cleaned the audio up a little bit, so it's a little bit easier to listen to. I like the old grainy stuff, Yeah. And like, Brian Scott has read so many of his lectures. If you want to hear a modern voice read it, some people don't like the older style, older English, I call it, Mm-hmm. But especially listening to him in his own voice. There's endless lectures. A great one is just like A Thing from the End. Like just search Neville Goddard Thing from the End. Outstanding. It kind of summarizes all of it. But along the way, I wonder if you feel this is that something happens is the best way to put it. Something happens and you get it, and all of a sudden life is different.
Yeah.
And then you really are, I would say, the promise. You are not only the law, you are manifesting. And when you really have these moments of like, you'll manifest via a whim. You'll just go, I sure wish I had, well, wouldn't that be nice? And you just realize the problem, what blocks the law is that we try too hard.
Yeah.
If we could just have a whim and let it go, I mean, and that's the thing too. You have the experience, something happens, consciousness changes, then you begin to see results, things happen, and then you realize also that like whether it works or not is all me. And so one of the things, if anybody who thinks that, hey, wandering around manifesting, that's just for fun, I'm like, F you. No, it's not. It's really hard because as you get it, you become Jesus. You become who you truly are. And I'm still working on understanding Neville, and like where you see David is your son, David calls you father, and you have the realization of who you are. Like I'm still working on grokking that one. I don't get it, but I know one day I will. And maybe I'm like holding off because that one's just too much for right now.
Dude, yeah. I mean, there have been some times where I've been listening to like, okay, so I live pretty much at the entrance of the Smoky Mountains. So I'll go into the woods just behind my house, and I will walk and I will listen in my wired headphones to Neville, and I think that like for me, what I'm running into is that when I walk and I am listening to these lectures and I'm tuning in and I'm really feeling into everything that he's saying, I start to imagine, and it's like I imagine for my friends and my family, and like I noticed that like, okay, so for myself, I have some pretty specific like goals or whatever that I'm working on. And of course, one of the virtues that I've gotten from this is go tell no man, right?
Yes.
That you should operate when you're doing your manifestation practice, mostly in secret, right? And so, I have been working on these very specific goals, and it is taking some time because I think that we maybe aren't as like energetically and subconsciously clear as it might have been attainable to be in the 50s, right?
Yes,
I think that there's a lot of noise, but I think the more that I've stepped down that path, like the more that I've really relaxed, I can very easily manifest for other people. It's kind of interesting. Like my mom, called me the other day and she told me that, and after I got into that little accident, I had this like, some of these like intrusive thoughts about like me hurting my back or something. Right. And, I start to like really, I'm like, nope, we're not doing that, because I know that that's how these things kind of create and perpetuate, but it makes me wonder like, okay, well, did I get hurt in that accident on like another state? Because I think I was shifting like as it was happening, and so, so my mom, weirdly, she reached out to me. She was like, I hurt my back. And so I spent like 5 minutes in sort of like affirming. I was in my car. I was on the highway or something. And I was just like affirming for my mom and her back. And oh, isn't it so wonderful that my mom is like perfect and happy and healthy and like has a perfect spine. And I was just, going off in my delusional like la la land or whatever. And my mom messaged me that night and she said, I don't know what happened, but my back is like feeling so much better. It feels like it's taken me back to normal. She didn't know that I was doing that, but it's like you do have a lot. It's fun to practice and to try it out and like to see it working too, because I know my things are pretty big things, you know, or they're like, I'm having to go from one state all the way over here to a state that's like different for what I'm trying to create. So it is taking a little bit of time, but it's like, I know that once these seeds, I just have such faith that once the seeds are impressed,
Yes,
that's what really matters, is like really truly impressing your subconscious mind. And I think that there's different ways of doing that, you know, for different people. And it's fun to try all the ways that people, you know, say to do that. I think that the state akin to sleep for me has been the most beneficial practice, like of all of his methods, you know?
oh yeah, and nice thing about that is if a person is wondering like what is that state akin to sleep, well, it's here, it's in at your command, and you can, if you want to just hear that, you can go to Brian Scott on YouTube, and he's read a lot of the Neville books, and just listen to him read at your command. It's not even an hour; it's like 40 minutes, and honestly, if you don't overcomplicate it, which I'm extremely talented at, I mean, I own that shit. Okay,
Yeah.
you know,
Me too.
yeah. So there you go. You know, that's all you need, really. If we all truly understood, like if we knew it and we were doing it and we had, as Neville says, prove it to yourself, put it to the test.
Yeah.
You know, if we had this little dinky book here, it's so narrow, you know, not even the width of a pencil, you know, if we got that, that'd be it. And one thing that I've noticed too, and I wonder if you do, is something happens, there's a change, and you just know when it's happened. Okay. But also things begin to manifest, like your life just works and amazing things manifest. And this is the tough one, is that the most amazing stuff that happens is things that I wasn't even deliberately creating.
Yeah.
And so where is that coming from? But I have faith in that. I have that expectation.
Well, let's kind of like let's look at this, like this doctrine, right? Because if you think about a lot of the stuff that, okay, like astrology is one thing, the world being how crazy it is another thing, right? Technically, according to Neville and these principles, you're creating all of it.
Yes.
Right? On that individual level, like you are creating your universe. So is there a collective, right? Is astrology, which is something that I've been doing as a profession for like almost 10 years. Like, I mean, I'm 32, but I've been doing it since I was young. Like, is that something that, like, I've really backed away from even using like personal divination, in the sense that like I don't want, it's like I'm door slamming on things that are not what I want. And so if there's like, you know, the astrology is very Nostradamus and it's very complicated right now. And it's like that I just haven't really been feeling it and sympathizing with it much in the same way as I used to. And, you know, I've been also very much in my own fucking world where like, okay, you know, recently I've been going to massage school, you know, to become a massage therapist. And that's been because I just have like an interest in the body and how the body factors into this all, right? Like, you know, when you release like a knot out of your fascia, like you're literally like clearing like a trapped emotion, which is putting you in a completely different state, right? So, you know, I think that like there's ways that the body factors into this all. And
Oh, it does. Absolutely.
right. And so I've just been like really nerding out on that. And I took a job at a like a front desk little jobby job, like as a, you know, just to kind of like So all of my work isn't so heavy, not that it's all heavy, but it's like sometimes with astrology, like you're really feeling into a lot with people. You're really like going there with people. And it's not that I don't love doing that. I do, but I was like, like a little part-time jobby job will do me some good, and I'll go meet people like in my area. Cause I'm like, not like, I've only been living here for like 2 years, and I'm still, it's like the mountain Appalachia of North Carolina, like an hour from the Tennessee border. So there's not really a whole lot of social stuff going on. And the place that I started to work, there's like all these really nice people. So I've just been kind of like really allowing myself, which is kind of unlike the renunciation path that I felt like I was on before, where I feel like now more like my desires are leading me into the most spiritually divine place I've ever been in, where I feel like when I was in a more renunciation path of like giving things up and like, people that go deep into like the conspiracy side of things, they'll give up like a bunch of different modern, comforts, and they'll like really like watch carefully everything that they eat. It's like a very specific, like they'll go really, really clean and really, really pure, whatever that is, right? I felt like I was kind of there, and then I started to allow my desires more to like fuel me in that direction, and then that's where I've been like really shifting states and all of that stuff. But I think that's interesting. I think that maybe there's somewhat of a program that keeps people in that renunciation, withdrawing entirely from the world or whatever. And, I've been like having more exposure to like the world in the last couple of months since I've been doing this. And it's been really good. It encourages you to really live. Like, I don't know if you've noticed that, but it's encouraged you to have money, to have what you need, to take up space, to have enjoyable experiences, where I feel like there's a part of spirituality that says just like turn away from everything,
Yeah, well, and that's one of the many traps that is put there for us. Like, I think that it's sort of like when you have a job, when you're working, your boss might like you and want you to do well, but they don't want you to do too well, because then you'll leave, right? So they kind of want you to do well within a certain frequency range. You know what I mean? It's like you filed so good, but don't have any self-confidence. Okay, you're really good at what you do here, but you'd never make it outside of here. Okay, so just remember that. And they're not doing anything wrong. They're just preserving their own self-interest, really. But that's really not the healthiest place to be coming from. But still, and so I think that religion is like that. The church on the corner, come here, give us your 10%, keep coming, support the church, keep this structure, working. But like the church does not want you to read a book on Neville.
Right.
You know what I mean? So I think that, without sounding conspiratorial, it's not that. It's just that we have a lot of programming. Humanity has a lot of programming to keep it from. It's like the whole idea of people will say this thing like, service to self, service to others. And I'm like, you know what? You can take that narrative and just get lost. I don't care. Right. That's stupid. And that's your narrative. You know what I mean? That's not mine. And so I do think that the more and more that we come from silent presence, like the hardest part of my day, not the hardest part, but the hardest thing I do every day is getting up early. That's not so hard. But to meditate, silent presence, being conscious, being the I am, spending time there. And then when your life starts to manifest from that place, that's the magic. And it is you creating, you know what I mean? It is you. So that's the thing that, there's no words for some of this stuff, but it's like
I know.
I do think when a person begins to manifest magical stuff from silent presence, that they know never would have happened, even by their own mind, but just this torus of energy begins to enter the earth plane, you realize that this is serious stuff, you know?
Yeah.
And so it's almost like the manifesting of the law. I think a person, if they have a hang up on it being materialistic, you'll get past that really quick once it begins to happen.
Yeah. And I think that, like, you know, this is why I do like Joseph Murphy, for like
Yes.
the reason that he's very much like practical, because he recognized that, like, when he was coming up, people were trying to get ahead and they were trying to get what they want, you know, rather than perhaps like seeking enlightenment. Like, I feel like the promise and the I am presence and all of that stuff that we learned from Neville and also Joseph Murphy. I mean, he was very reverent to the energy of like infinite intelligence, but I do find like some of the techniques and some of the like modus operandi that he rocks with is a little bit more practical than Neville, which is all about just like this very cosmic, like quantum, you know, like I find a lot of like practical benefit in learning from Joseph Murphy too. And I think that it's kind of interesting how they all have like slightly different perspectives in terms of like Neville, say, having, you know, people have no free will, right? That's pretty deep. But when you actually look at the people in your life, you know, and the way that they act, it's very much based on the way that you expect that they would act. So for me, like, I really had to clean up like a lot of my beliefs around like men and around relationships and around like finances. I think that there's just like a lot of like, it's like you said, humanity is very programmed, and at the root of some of that is very deep, like core wounds of like feeling abandoned by God would be like one thing that's a very deep core wound of humanity, is feeling like, you know, God has left me, or like, you know, feeling there's like an abandonment wound, and then like we're seeking sometimes like a savior, you know, and then like humanity has done that several times where we've received like some type of savior, and then the savior shits all over us because hello, it's a test, you know, like, because, you know, like God is salvation, but what that is like more what you're talking about with like the mystical, with the promise, and like really experiencing and knowing that, you know, that I and the Father are one or whatever. But like, I just think that until someone is willing to go in and like prune the vine, then they're not going to, like, it's going to be like how I was, like on autopilot. And honestly, not to toot my own horn or whatever, but self-concept it creates the world that you live in.
Yes, it does.
I'm a pretty smart cookie, and my brain is always going to be firing off, doing the thing. I'm always going to be having that, like, a tape is always going to be playing. Like, I love the people who can just sit in quiet presence, but for some reason, I don't know if it's my human design or my whatever, but I am a thinking thing. And I think that when I think singularly as opposed to, you know, in a double-minded state where I'm like very much thinking in my favor some of the time, and then the rest of the time I'm like, you know, these like intrusive, well, you're not good enough for this, or like, of course he would do this because ABC, you know, and just all of the gunk that we accrue. Where does that come from, right? Like, that's like when you're pruning the vine, right? You are crowding out like these ancient, you know, like grooves that we've just been in for so many years, right? Like thousands of incarnations of just kind of like, you know, and also clearing ancestral patterns. Like,
yes, you are.
When you are like pruning the vine, which just means to change your belief system. That's what I take it to mean. You know, repeating something enough times to where you accept it, like your subconscious accepts it and it becomes like a fact or a belief. You persist until the assumption hardens into fact, right? when you're doing that, you're really deleting like things that have been in your bloodline and in your family and in your soul's little journey down the rabbit hole, falling asleep, to who and what you are. And then you can wake up and like, you can realize like, who you are, and you can begin to, I just think our belief system really matters, which is why I think there's been so much control exerted over it. Right.
100%. Yeah. Yeah. And it has been, and it still is. And I think the only way you step out of that is, and this is I don't know any other word to use for it. I just call it, if awakening is on your timeline's schedule, then you do it, and some people are born very awake. Like you look at Swami Yogananda, like a Paramahashna Yogananda, the book, Autobiography of a Yogi.
Mm-hmm.
He remembered being frustrated as a baby because he couldn't move in a coordinated way, So wow. So if you're like really there, you're bored as a baby waiting to get bigger. So
yeah,
but basically totally. All of us are one way or the other. We are, if it's on your schedule to awaken, then you can step out of being on autopilot. And that is, people should be kind to themselves, because that is a big deal. And when you mention like pruning, there's a Neville Goddard lecture, and I'll put it in the show notes. It's in his own words. It's Neville Goddard, The Pruning Shears of Revision, where he talks about the unfruitful branch being trimmed,
Right.
And that's a big deal. We need to do that. And yeah, it is. I think right now we're in a time where, like you mentioned, quiet presence is very hard. And I think that's where maybe there's a real, I think, a renaissance of Joseph Murphy, of Neville Goddard, because in this, I'm going to call it like the existentially turbulent time, changing of cycles, crazy astrology, America's Pluto return. There's so much going on that it's like, you could say almost like it's not Neville that is your savior. It's maybe through that material you're realizing that you are your own.
Yes.
And then you find that you can manifest the timeline, the states that you want through this cycle, because it's like being in that quiet presence. Like I said, that's my hardest thing every morning, is to spend some time there. And I know it's the key, but like, if I get 10 minutes, I totally won. But it's hard. It's hard. I think we're at a time where maybe that's why the material is becoming so like re-entering consciousness. It never really left, but it's re-entering consciousness.
There's a huge surge of people that are discovering Neville for the first time, like myself. I kind of wanted to ask you, because so you mentioned the pruning shears of revision, right?
Yeah.
It's in one of his books too, where he talks about it, and I want to like find which book it is, and that's why I'm kind of thumbing through it.
Yeah, I don't remember.
So when I first started this material, obviously, I mean, I've said it multiple times, my state was not what it is now, and I was, really creating a lot unconsciously that it just all blew up and exploded in my face is how it felt, like, literally. And so I was in like kind of a sensitive, sort of delicate, very Twilight, like what, like kind of a space, right? And I think at that point in time, like, I found not only these teachings, but also revision specifically to be extremely like important, but ungrounding. Like the one time that I used it successfully before, very recent, which I want to talk with you about, just to get your opinion and your personal methods and all of that stuff. I've had a really good time with it recently, but the only time that I really used it successfully was when I revised my mom's carrying of me, basically, in birth, where she gave me she didn't give me any shots, like right in the revised version of my birth. And, there's been a lot of like changes in my consciousness that have resulted from me doing that revision and that ritual, where I went into a very deep trance state. but I think after that, I didn't really do revision properly because things weren't, the new memories were not being impressed, right, on my subconscious. So I was just consciously imagining, daydreaming things, and they weren't impressing themselves. So they weren't really changing the past, if you know what I mean. So I would run into like these big emotional walls and roadblocks with regard to that, right? And then I guess it was like a month ago, maybe, I discovered this one very traditional Neville YouTuber on YouTube. She was like her name is Missy Renee. She's very Neville, straight Neville, and that's what she teaches, and that's what she talks about, is just like his material. She's like a traditionalist, I think, in that way. And she loves revision. She's like, revise it, revise it, revise it, revise it, And so I have been in the last like maybe 2 weeks doing a lot of revision. And it's because I felt like I was kind of like internally stable enough to recreate some like memories where I felt like, I think what I'm trying to say is that for me, nervous system regulation has been a necessity with how transformational this work has been for me. Getting exercise, doing breath work, like doing things that put me in, like keep me in my body. And I think that's changed the impact of like some of these teachings. But I think I was doing revision wrong initially. And I just want to talk to you about like how you like to do revision and like what's your process and like what has your experience been with it, because some people, they don't notice any external changes. They just do it to feel better about their own life and their own circumstances in that moment. And then that kind of changes their state, changes their timeline, right?
Yeah.
Some other people have experienced extreme changes to where other people were like affected by their imaginings of the past. So I'm just wondering what you think about it. I was really like hoping to like pick your brain on this. So I'm glad that it came up.
Yeah. Well, there is that great lecture in Neville's own words, Burning Shares of Revision. And then I know that it's a chapter in one of his books, but I forget which one. And he talks about it too. So I think something that comes up and is that we start to have lots and lots of thoughts of our past. And this is just something that, for so many reasons can be coming up, but I'm just going to say for, hey, awakening people, right? You're feeling it. You get these, you realize that there are regrets. There are memories that are, we like our good memories also, but sometimes we need to kind of purify those. There's so many memories that are a part of our current energy that we've brought forward that are keeping our reality from being what we'd like it to be, And I also think that we keep uncovering these things. Like we didn't know it was there, and all of a sudden it hits us and you go, oh my gosh, And so I think we literally have to go back to that moment. So for me, for revision, it can be in a state akin to sleep. It can just be in, meditation. I like listening to like meditative music. One of my favorite times is the morning, just because now if you're an evening person, everyone's different. But for me, like, I love when the world is quiet, and so
I love the morning.
Yeah. So if you get up early, the world is quiet, and it's your time. And so I'll just sit and focus on the body's energy, and just be sometimes listen to like binaural beats or something, listen to something like that. And I think one of the things about revision is it can take a good number of tries. Sometimes you'll know you've got it. Maybe you get it in one shot, or maybe it takes a couple tries. Maybe you think you've got it, and then 6 months later you have to kind of do a little bit more work. So I think it's definitely a process, and it's really imagining, because I think revision is a big deal, because there's so many things in my life that I just regret. There's a great movie. I think it's called Magnolia.
Mm-hmm.
And
I haven't seen it.
Okay, so there's a movie called Magnolia, and the little bit of a spoiler here, but like this guy was an asshole, in his life, and he on his deathbed was saying like, cherish regret because it's the only thing of value you'll have of your life if you were an asshole your whole life. Now I don't want to go do that, right? But
listen, yeah,
but like he was like, so I have regret, and it's just, that's all. I'll put it that way. I have regret, like you wish you'd done something differently, and maybe the universe was saving you from making a mess, but one or the other, you regret. And so maybe you had a good time, but you could have had a better time. Maybe your heart wasn't open enough and you didn't really experience what your soul really wanted to experience. It's this regret of not living fully, and so morning meditation or whatever meditation it is for a person, you don't have to get that deep, do if you want to, but you just start in your mind just remembering that, and you have to kind of compress it a little bit because it may have spanned 5 years, right? Or like 3 months or something. You don't have that much time, right? So you're going to find pieces of that you feel, and just start living them the way that you would have liked them to be. Just imagining it and just do it and go, oh my gosh, this was like kind of good. I wasn't really there. I really wish I had lived that experience. So now I'm going to remember it and I'm going to make it awesome. I mean, this is like, whoa, I hope nobody's like, hope nobody can see, right? Because you're just like, wow, yeah. Wow, this is so amazing.
You really get into it.
You really get into it, and go, this is how I wanted it to be. I'm not even imagining how I want it to be. I'm there again. I'm not thinking of it. I'm there. I'm not in the present. I'm there. I'm living it as I wanted it to be. And I'm letting go of the apprehension that I had that held me back.
Yeah.
I'm just forgetting it, and just do it over and over again. If you do it once and that's it, maybe over and over again. Maybe you go back and visit. Sometimes I have found, which I didn't realize until just now talking about it, is that it can be replaced with the good version of the revision.
That's right.
So you like to go back and remember, oh, that was so great.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And does it affect the present? There's a part of me that thinks, you know what, you wouldn't know.
Yeah.
It did, and you don't know. Neville believed that it did change the past, literally. Some say that it doesn't, but it doesn't really matter because it changes you, and it changes your manifestational ability and experience and point of view, your self-concept, your energy. And then of course that happens all through your timelines, all through your states of your existence, of your life. So I mean, I would say revision changes everything, whether you experience it or not. It's changing you. And yeah, I would say that, especially for people who have things that I don't want to make it sound negative, but let's just say something you regret. You would have rather it been some other way. And it
totally,
like if a person had like relationships,
we're all adults here. Like we all have things that we know we could have done differently or like better. Like,
and so you wish you did. And it's like, and it holds you back, because you're remembering these experiences where you were not
your most ideal version
of yourself. And in part, it's the way you can kind of cheat with all of this, which I think is so great, is that so you hadn't figured it out.
Cheat codes.
Yeah, these are total cheat codes. If you want to be like God mode in like third in like Earth plane, like this is God mode. This is God mode cheat codes. That'd be great. That'd be like the next one. We'll call it God mode cheat codes.
Yes.
And so like if you want the God mode cheat code, is that as you become more awake, as you're doing that, you can go back in revision to moments where you were not, and you can live them just fully from your consciousness now.
Yeah.
You know, and it can take a good number of tries. You may have to work at it for a while, but you should be able to enjoy that, because it may uncover even deeper and other things. I mean, I noticed that too, where so much of my past comes up that I've got to revise, you know,
Yeah.
but.
And it's like, I don't ever want, okay, so for a minute there, my manifestation practice was feeling like work. And I was like, I don't want that. Like, I got really caught up in like affirming, not that it's not a good technique, or it can like, you saying affirmations can like create a neural pathway and it can move you into a state, right? But for me, I think when I look at like my learning style, like my astrology, all of that stuff, I think that a mixture of a couple of different things is more my speed, and for it to feel very relaxed feels really good to me. So the way that I've been revising specifically is through scripting, actually, is like through like writing out the memory as if like I would have liked to have, and then reading it over and over and over and over and over. Like whenever I'm really drowsy, I'll open up this book and I'll read like my revisions. And I think that gives them like the ability to, because it's really making use of that drowsy state. I have a lot of Virgo in my astrology chart, which is very like snappy, like very analytical, very like mental, verbal. So I think that lends itself really well to sometimes like affirming, tapping, kind of like doing things like that, but also writing has, and I think that within that there's been always in my life this like desire to be, or like pressure to be on all the time, which is not really a thing. It's like doesn't actually exist outside of me, right? It's just something that I do, or something that I am like have been afflicted with. But now I really have come to fully embrace and like almost give myself over to that really drowsy state. But I like visualizing, I like scripting, I like affirming. And, I come from kind of like a witchy background anyway. So I have like my candles and my oils and my incense. And I love how all of this stuff pairs together, knowing that ultimately like the techniques aren't really what's manifesting.
Yes.
I am, but I just love having all of those little like practices and little things, and going into like that more like weightless, formless type, like quiet presence is what I think you're calling it. And kind of remembering too to come back into my body with a lot of this stuff, and like anchoring it in my body feels really good, because I think otherwise it can be kind of dissociating, like doing breath work, taking a walk, like going swimming, like really moving for me has been very helpful in terms of like, continuing to move a lot of this stuff that is, because you do purge when you or maybe that's a limiting belief, I don't know, but you do purge I purge when I transition across states. Like when I can tell that I've moved from one dimensional place or whatever to another, I'm like, oh shit, and sometimes there'll be frequently car stuff, that's a theme, though I'm trying not to form an assumption about that.
Yeah.
Getting like physically sick or just feeling wobbly, which for me, eating chicken has been one of the most helpful things, weirdly, to stabilizing myself when I'm in that wobbly state of being. I think that collagen, which is basically like fascia, like elastin, I think that our fascia in our bodies and like the energy meridians and things like that flow through them, if there is astrology, right? I think that's where it's happening. I think that we are it's literally like stardust. And so when we can eat chicken, even though, maybe in an ideal world, we wouldn't have to, but we can kind of like replenish and then settle more into a state. I think states are to be grounded into and like fully occupied, you know?
Yeah. And I
Anyway.
think, and it's one thing about like Neville is we have to realize that, you know, Neville was just a badass manifester. And so he makes it all sound so simple, you know, but
right.
it may be, you know, many things are simple, but they're difficult to do, you know? And so, yeah, I think our physical practice definitely does change, you know, like to me, if it truly was in harmony with nature, if it truly was healthy, how do I put it? Like I was vegan when I was younger for quite a while, you
Me
know,
too.
and the thing is, I would love it. I wish, okay, I really do. I wish, you know,
Sure.
but on 3D Earth, nah, you know, I wish, but no, it doesn't. And then, so that's the thing. You find that your physical practices change. Like I went from, well, like Stuart Wilde called it being a fringe dweller, where you have like a foot in the world and a foot out of it, like to be of this world but not in it. And so you're just sitting here, like you're just kind of in that place of like silent presence, and you're aware the magic is happening. You have your intent, you want to manifest, you're revising, you realize each manifestation, some are instant, but some are also something that Neville Goddard didn't really talk about, but I think is very relevant, is they're a path, you know, they're not a straight line. Like you have an intent to manifest, and maybe you're working on it for a while, then you realize, wow, that's not for me. I don't really want it. You know, and then you find I actually want this instead. So even manifestation is not like, that's a path too. So it's one of the things is it's purifying your intent from that center of I am, you know, where, you know, your imagine, as Neville put it, like your imagination is God. And so you're sort of like, I'll use the word like purifying, but really it's more like you're getting deeper into self, and you're manifesting from there, and you realize that we manifest junk also. Like we try to manifest things that we don't. One of the hardest things to do is to let go of a manifestation that you've been like, I mean, you've really been working on, but you realize like, no, I don't want that. It's like, it can be hard to let go of one that you've evolved past, but that was part of the evolutionary journey.
Yeah.
Was trying to manifest something you don't want.
Totally. No, I think that, like, you know, for one reason or another, okay, I think that if you desire something, like in the pit of your belly, like as your higher self, because I think there's nobody up there. It's just, you know what I mean? Like we're here
and
now.
That's a hard one. So we have to, right? That's one of the first steps, is getting over that. You're like, it's here. Yeah. Yeah.
Then I think that for me, like, okay, so, you know, I haven't necessarily been with this long enough to have had like many of those experiences, but I have been, because I was lacking at times in my life, like discipline, consistency, something that Neville considers to be like persistence, right? I have not always been the most persistent growing up, and like felt like I had this like, oh, well, I might as well fucking give up and, you know, have had that tape playing at times, right? So you know, just in the last couple of months, right, of having these kind of like specific ideas of what I want my life to look like, you know, and I'm kind of like, I'm not giving up. Fuck that. I want what I want, and I want it. And that means that I'm going to have it. And you know what I mean? And it's like, it's totally different from how I'm used to operating as someone who was also once vegan, was, you know, committed to having a terrible time on the prison planet while, you know, also kind of like secretly pining for this like other place. I mean, you know, it's like the whole thing, right? And so, you know, I've gotten to that space where I'm like, no, I want what I want. It's happening. It's happening with authority. And like, it's okay if it takes a little bit of time. I think that it's true that there is, once you impress the subconscious, there's a bridge of incidents that can take months or years to play out. So I think being patient and persistent and not double-minded, and like having that, like knowing that you've impressed your subconscious with what you want. Like, I feel like when I talk about it, it almost sounds harsh, right? It sounds like I'm being harsh with myself, but I really think it's like giving myself, that's actually self-love. It's like giving myself the gift of the Father, right? That's like the thing, is like, I'm being like, no, like I'm going to use my consciousness to like, kind of like shift myself into the version of myself that has the future and the life that I want, and like, I feel like there's like, at times in the past, I would have kind of like shuddered at that, right? Or like, I would have felt like, geez, this woman is so harsh. Like, there's like but it's the Father energy. Like, that's what this is. Like, for me, is like a, maybe a healing, or like a resurrecting of like my own masculine energy that can like, use my consciousness in a way that allows me to be provided for, have what I need, and, achieve whatever my aims are. So even if I don't quote unquote manifest what it is that I'm trying for right now, I'm not even really looking at that as an option. And I'm just like, nope, like, it's already done, like blah, blah, whatever. And then as soon as I'm in the Sabbath, I think I'll know. And then the bridge of incidents will play out. Like, I just have that like implicit faith, because I think I've been kind of like training myself. And this all feels like training. Like, it feels like I'm training on like personal specific things for now, so that when I need to, like you said, door slam on a hellish 3D if I need to, then I'll be able to do that, because I will have spent this time like, really cultivating my mind and bringing discipline, because it takes discipline to prune the vine, right?
Oh, it does. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And when you have a teacher like Neville, I mean, he lived as long as he was supposed to, but he left, and he left so much material, left a lot of great books and endless audio recordings. And I know one day video is going to show up. I've intended that. I know it's going to, many have. There will be video one day that we will find, it'll be uncovered.
Hopefully it will be original and not AI.
Oh, it'll be original. Yeah. 100% original. Because there's so much Neville AI now, which I kind of think is sort of neat, but it's creepy. So I want the real thing,
Yeah, me too. Totally.
And I think that it's sort of like, if one has ever done something, like it could be, I'll just use an example, like something physical, okay? And there's like a master that can do it, let's say like you could say karate, you could say aikido, you could say a lot dance, some extreme physical art, and when you start, if there's the sensei or the master, they make it look easy. Like I like aikido, and a aikido master, let's say somebody who's been at it forever and is exceptionally talented, they just float around like a Buddha and just throw everyone all over the studio laughing, but then you try it, and just standing in a basic strong stance and moving, it's like you're falling over. It's hard. So the masters are great because they leave a trail for us, so that a path, so that we know how to get there. They left a trail for us. It's a path. It's so wonderful. And I think the thing is with Neville is that he was a master, and you could say like, we're not. And so sometimes there's such a gap that it can be hard, because all you're doing is you're seeing Neville manifest and hearing him talk about things. You're seeing the Aikido master, but you're like, well, crap, I'm just, I just showed up with my little like manifestation white belt here, And I'm like, and so I think that people need to be easy on themselves and just
Totally.
realize that it is a path of mastery, and you test it and it does work. But, that's like where Joseph Murphy comes in so in handy,
Yeah,
because
totally.
he's a lot more, I'd say, personable, and there's a lot of lectures in his own words and stuff. And he wrote a lot of great books. And I think
I have this
sometimes,
by
yes.
Joseph Murphy.
Oh, which one is that?
The coffee stains, the miracle
Oh,
power of your mind, complete with the golden Illuminati pyramid, which
yes.
is kind of interesting. It's like, I think that like they're kind of, some of these guys, maybe more Joseph Murphy than Neville Goddard, is more part of like that white square that we hear about. Like,
White
you know what I
square.
mean? Like on the checkerboard, you know how there's like the black square
Yeah.
and the white square. Like, I think that Joseph Murphy is like a white hat. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think he was
Yeah.
very initiated, but also like devoted to revealing like the truth
Oh, yeah.
of like,
Oh, yeah.
you know.
Well, Joseph Murphy and Neville, they knew each other.
They
I
did.
mean,
They had the same teacher who
yeah.
was a
Abdullah.
Kabbalist. Yeah, like an Ethiopian Kabbalist. And yeah, I'd love to find more information
About
on Abdullah.
Abdullah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there's a book that supposedly has some of his history. It's called like There Was a Potter or something like that. And I have it somewhere. I have not gotten through it. I don't know if it's like legit or not, but yeah, Abdullah existed, but we don't know that much. That's one of the greatest. It's funny. I
That's
think
right.
one of the great ways to really get into the law is Neville Goddard's lecture on Abdullah in Barbados.
Yes, you
You
are
are
in
in
Barbados.
Barbados,
Yeah.
and you're just like, and that's when. So the thing I have to remember is that Neville also struggled too. He had to learn, and he did, and he was in the midst of a great teacher of it. And you know, we're I think one of the cool things to think about is you are part of that lineage. Your teacher
Mhm.
is Abdullah ultimately. You know what I mean?
That is deep. And you know what? It's crazy too, because I think every single fall or like, end of like late summer, early fall, I come into like new teachings, right? Like, I think in 2020 and 2021, it was really understanding. Well, to be honest, it was really understanding some of the spiritual bad stuff that like
Yes.
happens,
Oh,
and
yeah.
really dealing with the likes of like inorganic entities and beings, and kind of having to like keep my space clean in a whole new way, and like really was dealing with a lot of like needing to do psychic self-defense and like sort of like dark arts training in like 2020 and then 2021. But then in 2022, somewhere in there, I discovered Steiner and like read everything I could get my hands on and listened to like hours and hours and hours and hours and hours of material. And then this year, it's been Neville and Joseph Murphy. And I really feel like I'm here to stay for a minute. Like this, because it's something that you have to apply. It's like there is a application aspect of anthroposophy and Steiner and that path, and I think it's really interesting to just, if I might nerd out for a second,
Oh, good. Yeah.
to combine them, right? If you think about like the mystery of Golgotha or like the, crucifixion in anthroposophy, like as it's portrayed, and how like Jesus going through that crucifixion process, which Steiner does recognize that there was a crucifixion and an ascent, um, and then kind of like how now what humanity has to do in the rise of sort of like this Ahrimanic antichrist, I guess, is to be reborn in like the human heart, which is sort of like the viewed as the Christ return in anthroposophy, as something connected to like Jesus and the Son, So as like a bridge between, or not a bridge between, but like there's this polarity of like, you know, Ahriman and Lucifer, and in the middle is the Christ stream, and it like flows through the human heart as like the untouched place. And so to combine like the purity of heart and that sort of like, that's what I tap into when I'm in quiet presence, right? And to combine that with some of this stuff, like the Jesus Christ that's in the human imagination, and you know, how I and the Father are one, and to really just like, you know, it's like, the more that I think about it, the more that I think I'm just like an esoteric Christian, you know, at the end of the day, I feel like I've taken the Christ pill, you know, and I think it's alive in me and it's alive in you. And then I go outside and it's like alive in the river, and, you know, it's alive in the trees. And
yeah.
So,
it's just, the difference is you're just not putting the Christ outside of yourself.
Right.
And it's the thing is once it's internalized, then you actually, I believe you really do see it externalized.
Exactly. I totally agree. And I think that, okay, so one of my favorite revisions, I guess I do have to go a little bit soon, but I did want to share with you that one of my favorite revisions is remembering in my Delulu false memory, whatever, remembering that my friend in 2015 gave me this book, the Neville Reader, and a Florence Scovel Shin book. And so in my revision, I have it so that I've actually been doing this for years. And so there are things that I'm remembering that just were positive things that just came about because you manifest what you are, and I'm nice. And so sometimes there'll be like a positive, miraculous thing that happens along the way before Neville, right? So I've imagined that these were things that I came up with through like the state akin to sleep, or affirming, or imagining.
Yeah.
Like I kind of, so that I can kind of indoctrinate myself into thinking that I'm like a master of the law, right? And that I've been doing this for 8 years, and it's so easy for me now, and like life is easy because I've discovered this and I've been doing this. So it's just this like, and it's been working, like that's been naturally like speeding things up. So there's no real limit, I think, to what we can do, especially when we use our discipline and like when we use our mind in a way that's mostly like not double-minded, like thinking, from the end, or from a place of already being that version of ourselves that maybe is already in the new dimension, and what might that look like, and you know.
Yeah, and you're already there. Well, that's the thing. That's truly like nonlinear manifestation and thinking. I mean, it is. It absolutely is, and that's the case. I mean, because manifestation ultimately is not linear.
You
know?
It's not, and time is a farce. And so if you think about it, like, okay, so this is part of my problem, Craig, is that I have been studying cycles of time throughout like history, whatever that is at this point, who fucking knows? But like, I've been studying cycles of time, and like have been very attached to cycles of time, you know, because of my work. And now I'm like, well, shit, who cares? Like, you know, now we're on now time, you know, and kind of like the lecture that he did, The Pearl of Great Price, where you have to sell it, like astrology, you have to sell it, tarot, you have to sell it. Like, you know, I used to like douse a lot with like pendulums, sell it, it's happening. So, you know what I mean? Like you have to really sell it and like go all in on like you as the creating power, like in your universe. And so I think for me, like, it's hard. It's hard to reconcile those two things, but honestly, it's way easier than you think. I've just become kind of like a little bit more detached from astrology. Like people still want it from me, so I'll dip into it, but I'm like mostly, I mean, obviously, it's really interesting because I I love it. Those archetypes are part of us. And, you know, we can't necessarily, I think, like extricate ourselves from our cosmos, but we can spin that shit in our favor any day of the week. I think, I mean, that's been my experience so far of like not giving the planet so much power over like feeling like that, like, you know, feeling like it's pulling me or like, you know, right. You know what I'm talking about? It goes back to when in the beginning, when I was talking about that, like hormonal, emotional feeling, like very involved with it all, you know, and that had to go by the wayside for me. And I think that that type of energy was keeping me more tethered to astrology, if that makes sense.
Yeah, the Pearl of Great Price, that's one that like a warning label on that one, it will piss you off, you know?
Oh yeah. No, yeah. I mean, some of this is
like,
no joke.
Because you're like, how dare you? That's my, you know. But yeah, the Pearl of Great Price, you can hear that in Neville's own words, that lecture's out there. So you can hear Neville speak that one. Brian Scott did a good reading. And
yeah, I
you
think
can
listen to that.
Yeah, and that's the thing. You do have to sell it, you know, but you gain everything. But selling it costs nothing, and you gain everything. And the Pearl of Great Price, printing shares a revision. Pearl of Great Price, just to hear Neville speak those things is so powerful.
You get pissed.
Oh, you get pissed. You're like, no, that's my Pearl. That's mine. You're not taking it. I'm not going to sell it. You old man, F you, you know?
Exactly.
But like,
I felt that. I've literally like a good teacher will put you through those fucking paces and not like, that's the thing. And I think that I've totally been in that like disillusioned. This doesn't work. This isn't real, you know, space. I've been there.
Well, the thing about something that's, and I know you got to go.
I know.
What gets me, that sparks me when you mention that is, one of the reasons why we have to do this material and why it's important to know that you can manifest what you want. You can be at peace in the midst of, well, you're at peace if you decide to be, you know?
Yeah.
And you're manifesting, and why it changes your energy, life changes, so much begins to happen. As I think right now, Western civilization, which we're both sitting in, I think that with like the Pluto return, speaking of, you know, especially that, speaking of, you know, astrology and things, but I think we're going through for many reasons, you might say like a dark night of the soul.
Like a near-death experience.
Like Western civilization is. It has to, and now I lose the words for it, but it's like the Western civilization is having to go through introspection and a change. Like, it's not a unipolar Earth anymore. It's a multipolar. Things are changing. We're in the midst of a changing cycle.
Yeah.
And the West has to, this is it. The West has to do its shadow work. You know, I think the Western mindset is being forced to do its shadow work and realizing, like, you know, you're not just completely right no matter what because you're American. Like, that's bullshit. You know, you need to like, you know, and so I think that is happening. And one of the things I've had to not revise recently, but that I've had to feel, transmute, is that you can't take on, this is an important thing for people, I think, you cannot take on all of the Western shadow, because because that is a collective thing.
Fuck that. I'm not taking on any of that.
Yeah.
I mean,
and
like,
you don't have to take it all on, because you probably don't think that way anyhow.
Right.
You know what I mean? But a lot do. And I think right now we're at a time where the Western shadow is being forced to be addressed and reconciled and dealt with. But you've got a little bit of it. Everyone's got at least I did, or I do, a little bit, you know?
I think that, like, the desire for, like, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, it's fun. Yeah, when you transmit that bit that's yours, then you're going to be free and you can keep moving. But just realize that we're in a time of the collective shadow having to be reconciled. Most will not. But you can do your bit that you have, if you do, and you can keep moving. And you just, that train wreck is fucked, you know?
Right.
But where you're heading is much, much different. Even if I'm not really even sure what it looks like, I feel it And that's something I connected to when I started getting into the material and really grokking it. Don't know where we're going, but it's good.
Exactly. I feel that. And, I don't mean that like, it's weird. I don't look upon like Western ideas, Western whatever, as like an entirely bad thing. Like, I don't have any American exceptionalism in me, truly, but I also could see how like, okay, like I've seen this in my spiritual life a lot, like how I naturally was kind of pushed or like was led sort of to gravitate towards Eastern ideals and Eastern ideas, right? Where I think like, okay, obviously like I'm a whitey. Okay. My ancestors are Western, and I think that like in connecting with that and like connecting with like Western, specifically Western magic, and how I see kind of like Neville's material doesn't really belong anywhere. It's not Western. It's not Eastern. I think it is a little bit more Western though, because it is based on like the things that you desire to experience a little bit, it can kind of be a little bit more Western. But I feel like when I started doing this, rewriting like my own subconscious, sort of like, dabbling more with that, I felt like I was doing the most shadow work of like my life when I first started. And when like my universe reacted and responded in a way where I was like, because, when you first go in there to like turn the lights on and to like scatter the roaches or whatever, you know what I mean? It's like, ooh, it can be really like, wow, I've been believing like this, and this my whole life. And oh my God, fuck, like that's so limiting. I'm wearing it like a fucking, like a headdress. It's so limiting, and constricting. And man, it feels nice to take that off. But now I don't know exactly how to be. So I'm just like, just I think that this process of like transitioning from the old man, as Neville calls it, to the new man, like really allowing yourself to go through that process of transformation and like allowing your like the renewing of your mind. That's fucking shadow work unlike I've ever experienced. And I've always been like a little bit more like internally negative, like kind of set at cynical, right? So
yeah,
to kind of be circling that drain all my life of like, oh, I'm doing shadow work, but really I'm just emotionally masturbating, like, so I think, yeah, I agree with you in the sense of like the Western shadow with the Pluto return and all of that stuff. And like the need to have, I mean, it's not happening in my universe. For some reason, I go to work and, I like at my little jobby job at the front desk of the hotel, and then I go to my school, my massage therapy school. And it's very much like everybody's kind to one another. There's not really, I'm not having people beating each other up in front of me at fucking Walgreens because I'm not going to be in a Walgreens most likely. But you know what I'm saying? Like,
yes,
I'm not observing what I'm seeing on Twitter.
Yes.
Or X or whatever,
Yeah. And that's the thing with this material is that, and that's something people will I'm coming to, and I think people do come to, is that you really are manifesting your own experience. And then you get into the great one, Neville's lecture about the tickets to go to AIDA. Remember that? Mm-hmm. Like, so he had to go get tickets, and somebody tried to like rob the place. It's this whole like Walgreens experience happened around him. But because his intent was so powerful and he knew who he was and what he was doing, the situation served him, and he ended up getting it. If people haven't heard it, I'll send it to you. I'll put it in the show notes. It's a Neville and AIDA where he was in basically like a Walgreens freak out. But of course it's Neville, badass manifester. He was like, even the thief is sent to serve you. Yeah.
So having that foundational belief of like, no, really, everything does work out for me.
Yes.
That's what that like brings up, and that's like the healthy self-concept thing. And I swear to God, like, especially in my generation, right? I was born in 91. I think that people are entrained to hate themselves, like legit. And that's why you see so many millennials with like these raging, like not only like leaky guts, but also like mental health issues, right? Like there's just like this like rampant, socially acceptable self-loathing. And then we wonder why nothing changes, you know, just on any level, right? And it's because the self-concept of humanity right now is shite, you know?
It sucks. It sucks ass. It does. Yeah. And the thing is, well, Neville, as he put forth, and he did say, I can't remember if I read it or he said it, but he does quote that biblical line, you know, those who do not know me injure themselves and love death. You know, and ultimately he's talking about your your imagination, you, that I am. If you don't know yourself, you don't know God, don't know God, don't know yourself. So he was saying to not have that knowledge is to worship death and hate yourself. And it's like, and you know, I don't think to grasp all that Neville is speaking of, you don't need the Bible. I think that we won't maybe even quote that in the future per se. It's fine if it's here now, but like, it served him, but like there's lines in there that are so damn powerful, you know, like that one, like those who do not know me, don't know self, don't know I am, injure themselves and worship death and love death.
It's interesting too, because Neville was very conflicted on the world. And I think like his teachings changed a lot, like from the 30s to the 70s. He said that you view the world as you are, right?
Yes.
And he also said that the world is full of dead people. Like everybody's dead except for the people that are alive, right? And so I think like, you know, there's a little bit of like that's a schism, I guess. And I'm like trained, I feel like it's in my nature to like look for these types of schisms within like ideologies. So I look at that and I'm like, okay, maybe he started from, you know, everybody is dead here to you see the world as you are. Like maybe that was also sort of like a process that he had to kind of travel through states or whatever to get through, you know?
Yeah, and it reminds me of where he talks about how he could stop time. How he could enter a scene and like stop it. And like the birds would stop in the sky and everything. He actually could, you know, stop reality in a way. And
I think we're headed there. I think like we are like within the next like 10 to 15 years, I feel that people will be able to, well, I think this all also explains why like they, them, whatever, whoever they are, want to inject everybody with shit, you know, so that we can't, you know, do these things. But I think these things and greater will ye do, right? That idea of like, if you have like the faith of a mustard seed, then you can turn to the mountain and say, move, and it will move, you know, in my name, whatever, right? I think that we're like coming up on like those times, like, and that's just based on like my own like physical experience, like being hit by a fucking car like a couple weeks ago and still being very much fine and walking around and not just bouncing back like strangely quickly in the last couple of years. Like feel that I'm like aging in reverse, or like there's something going on there, right?
Yeah, something happens with something happens, and it's true. And this is where Neville says put it to the test, and that would be what I would, you know, just I'm working on it myself. Yeah, it's put it to the test, because it's not just what you intend and you want to manifest that you will create. It is that you'll get hit by a fucking car and you'll bounce in the air and land, right? And you'll be like, yeah, and shit, nah, it's nothing, you know?
It would be like, I'll just ride home and like take a bath and watch a movie and then wake up the next day and give 3 massages and
and that is all I can tell the people is if you know this, you know this. If you're getting there, you're getting there. But it's real. Like a car will hit you, you'll bounce in the, you know, and you'll be like, I'm good. I'm good.
I think the lady that hit me like saw her whole legal life ahead of her. She was like, oh my And I was like, it's okay. I'm okay. Everybody's okay. And, you know, sometimes things like that kind of creep on you, but that's not happened in my experience with this. So
yeah, and you're like, I'm good. Then you like gave her a copy of like At Your Command, you know? You're like, here you go, I'm good.
Here's the gospel. Yeah. No, I think that like she's since seen me riding my bike around my town, because when she hit me, she was pulling out of her driveway, and she's just like, I don't know how that girl is still standing. Anyway, maybe in some other dimension I died or something. It's
could
like
be, absolutely could be, you know. And you know, the thing is, you might be in silent presence, you might be meditating, you might be in revision. There's going to be a time where you may see the version of you that died,
or that got hurt, you know,
or that
like,
got hurt,
right?
or that, you're going to say, so Neville did it. And that's the thing. And I do realize that these things are beginning to happen to me, you know, where you will see or feel another version of yourself that's present. And it's just, it's real. So we'll see. Like, let me know if you find a version of yourself that, you know, sprained an ankle or you know, or whatever.
I swear, I started having like those intrusive thoughts of hurting my back, because I think that there is a version of me out there that hurt my back. So then I went to my best friend to have some body work done when I went home for Thanksgiving. I was like, Asher, well, you know, it's funny that he has a biblical name, but I was like, Asher, I need for you to basically like interrupt the thought pattern, you know, body work in conjunction with the Neville material is very powerful. I will say that. But yeah, it's been so fun to have this chat, and I've been I feel very inspired on the Neville. Like, I need any more inspiration for that type of thing. I've been like surfing that wave very hard. Like, I never do anything halfway, and I just like have been throwing myself like full on into it, and it's been real fun.
Yeah, oh, it's great talking to you. And everybody, everyone go to meredithluckystars.net. It'll be in the show notes. You know, get yourself a 2024, you know, reading.
Unless you want to take the Pearl of Great Price, and then that's also fine.
Yeah, if you want to, you know, it's like, well, I feel like I work on the Pearl of Great Price, but now I feel like the things that maybe I thought were, now it's fun. It's weird, but it freed me from the negative attachment of things.
Totally.
You know, so yeah, you know, if you have the Pearl of Great Price, you've taken it. That's fine. Just enjoy one of Meredith's charts, because it's fun. You know, it's
enjoyable.
Fun. Yeah, do it because it's fun. All right, well, you take care.
Likewise.
And I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you.